So today I'm going to talk about VFL and kind of do a bit of a review overall in terms of, some of my thoughts on the overall kind of, game and where it is and, where it will be in the future. Obviously, we will be doing a VFL for champs as well. So, be on the lookout for that. That will have a similar sort of format to Master Toronto. We'll talk about the format a bit in this video. So, obviously, it's over. Here are the perfect teams if you want to take a look at them. I do think it's interesting to take a look at who did the best. So, Sato, I mean, you can see here, Sato, 84 points overall. The next highest is Ruxick with 67. That is an unbelievable gap from first to second. Sato, I mean, that's almost like a whole game week of insanely good performance worth of points, right? A 17-point game week is like, wow, what a performance. And Sato is that much higher than the next highest player. That's incredible, to be honest. That level of consistency is unbelievable. Ruxick as well was terrific value, and really has been one of the standout players of Stage 2. So yeah, him in there, no surprise. Narrate has had a really good stage and stepping up for Sentinels, and I think if Sen are going to win champs, Narrate needs to be in this form. If they're going to, I mean, not even just win champs, if they're going to make like the top 3, I think he kind of needs to be in this form. Kiko is just a kind of VFL GOAT, and Levin as well. Now, I think what's interesting about this, right, is obviously Sato, 84 points, unbelievable. But actually, the next 3 aren't duelist players, which is interesting. Now, Kiko obviously is priced as, a very high, expensive player, because he had popped off before. But just kind of something for me to know, I think, scoring next time that, not all were duelists. Looking at by game week, obviously game week 1 was dominated by the Pacific players because you had double points. Obviously Urotan went absolutely crazy and then slowed down big time the rest. The next week you had Jemkin, Narrate, King, Ara, and Sugetsu. The week after was Sato, Ruxick, Gobert, and Mada, Nets. I think we might see Sato on here again potentially, or if not, he certainly would be close. Oxy, Mada, Devi, Zek, and Ruxick. Oxy as well also had a decent performance, I would say. And then Kayak, Sato again, Rienz, Martin, and Hero. So, yeah, just an interesting kind of thing. I think it was a pretty tough stage to fully predict overall, as they always will be, of course. In terms of the leaderboard, I know what you're all thinking. TMV, where did you finish? Well, let's take a look at the event total here. Counter Fighter came first with 598 points. Congratulations to you. I would guess that if you finished in the top, I'm going to guess you had Sato in there from pretty early on. If you just would have picked Sato and IGL'd him every week, you would have been doing really, really well, which is absolutely crazy considering his team lost 2 games as well. So, yeah. Well done if you came first. iHex, I know, is commonly in my streams. You actually ended up finishing 9th. Top 10, still well done. If you're wondering about me, I actually came 238th, which not great from me, to be honest. 519. So, it's not terrible, right? It's not like a disaster, but not good. And there are some players to blame, I think, when we take a look at my team overall. And one of the main culprits, I think, is this guy, Look Show. So it started off super well. He got a 15-pointer, and I was like, this guy always pops off. Why don't I just bring this guy in? He's amazing. He's just an unbelievable player, right? Let's just bring this guy in, and I get him for this. I get him for a 2-pointer, a 9-pointer, an 11-pointer, and a 4-pointer. So 2 okay weeks, 2 weeks where you're like, oh, that's not too bad, and then 2 stinkers in 2 and 5. So yeah, I mean, just not good whatsoever. Not good whatsoever. That pick, that's probably my worst VFL pick, I think, of all time. And I know a lot of other people fell for this trap as well. Kess, who again in week 1 popped off and then didn't do very much, right? And yeah, he was good value, but was he really? Because he didn't really perform that well at all. So yeah, tough one overall. If we do go player stats and yeah, average points per game, here it is, the list. Sato, Ruxick, Narrate, Kiko, 11. Oxy tied as well on 63 points. Then May, Woot, Rienz, something second. Nets, Devi. In terms of some of the worst picks you could have had, I mean, let's take a look at the worst as well. Why not? Orango finished with minus 0.8 points per game. Tui's with minus 0.4. They finished on minus points. Obviously, there's some players who didn't play, so we'll ignore them for now. But yeah, looking at some of the others, Heat, Wild Oreo, Some team secret players down here as well, really not doing very much at all. Yeah, there was some pretty bad picks if you went Fioria. Obviously, you're expecting these to kind of be down here. Yeoman really didn't do that much either, to be honest. Who's like a player on a good team who did kind of nothing? Proxer from Gentle Mates I mean, they didn't win a game, but they were an alright team. And, you know, the other Gentle Mates players aren't really down here. They kind of popped off. Crazy Guy, only averaging 5 points a game. Not the best. Super from EG. Won multiple games. I mean, you've also got Icy. Icy is a duelist. Jesus. And he had a crazy week 5. God, before that, he got 11 points in 4 weeks. That's horrible. Horrible if you picked Icy up early. But yeah, that's where we are now. In terms of the overall game, and the reason why I'm really making this video, it's just to talk about the game, right? I think, because obviously some of the changes we made was 2 transfers instead of 1. I think that was a good idea. I think that worked better. I think it allowed you more flexibility. I think that was, you know, a good choice overall in terms of, you know, how to make it work, right? One thing that is somewhat out of my control is this, right, which was the fixtures. Obviously, Pacific having a super week, you know, neither week, because EMEA, I still don't know why, but EMEA starting a week later in Stage 1, and then obviously Stage 2 here having the Pacific Super Week whilst the others didn't have a Super Week. You know, it did mean that there was kind of a straightforward, like, meta of you have to have, you know, start with Pacific and then sell them, or in the other one it was, you know, don't start with EMEA and bring in EMEA players throughout, which obviously wasn't ideal. But I don't honestly, obviously I just hope next year that they actually just all play at the same time, right? And we can just have a stage where pick whoever you want and change to whoever you want, right? That would be the ideal, but I honestly don't know how I could really fix that without, you know, making some major changes to the game, which I don't really want to do. So that one is kind of not up to me. Also, playoffs, I know that that's something that people often ask, like, will there be a playoffs? But, like, again, if we take a look at, like, the schedules of the playoffs, obviously Pacific has already completed most of their playoffs. And playoffs in general are just very difficult to do, essentially, because, you know, if we did it by weeks like we do currently, like, let's take Pacific as our example, who already would be in their playoffs whilst the rest of week 5 is going on. Well, if you pick an RRQ player, they played 4 games. Right? They played 4 games in 1 game week. Whereas if you picked I don't know, a player from Gen G, right? You think Gen G are going to do well? They played 1 game, right? And RQ played 4. You know, but the playoff schedules aren't the same between the different regions, right? Like EMEA playoffs, you know, we saw the Pacific playoffs. They did their upper final and lower round 3. They've already done them in part of their week, right? But EMEA aren't, right? They're just doing it up to lower round 2 in the upper semis, and then they're having a break. So the playoff schedules are different. You know, like, it would be a headache of, like, well, do I keep my Paper X player for this week when they aren't playing, but then they will play the week after? Like, you know, it's just very difficult to do playoffs, I think. So, like, going forward, I don't think VFL will probably be able to incorporate playoffs very well, because you're essentially just randomly picking teams and hoping that, you know, the team that you picked loses their first game, but then goes on a lowest run, right? Which doesn't feel very fun or fair, because if you predict wrong, then you're just going to end up with no points, and someone's going to end up with 50 points, which obviously seems a bit strange. So playoffs is something that's a bit out of my control, and I don't think we will do. But as I say, I am hoping that in the future we do get, you know, just a settled game week schedule where all of them are on the same schedule in the stage, so that you can have just a pick whoever you want for game week 1. That would be ideal, but it is what it is. It's somewhat out of my control. There are some other things I do want to talk about, though. Specifically, I think the scoring is fine, right? I think the scoring, you know, provides you with enough options, right, in terms of how the actual rules work of the game. You know, there's, between the total points of players, right, we've got a difference of, what, 88 points from top to bottom. You know, I don't know where this average is coming in, but, you know, scrolling about halfway down the list, you know, you're getting to, like, 30s. You know, the better players are getting into the 60s, right? So I think there's enough scoring difference, you know, even from week to week, right, to make it interesting. Like, if you take Mitch, who was in my team, right, like, week 2 he gets 13, week 5 he gets 1, right? So there's enough kind of elements there to make that kind of interesting, of like, oh, should I keep him if he's only going to 1-pointer, right? Like, worst case scenario, you lose 2-0. So I'm kind of happy with where the scoring's at overall. And yeah, I think that's fine. One thing I'm not fully convinced on is the bench, right? Because I do still think, like, I thought by changing it to 9 and 2, I thought maybe that would make the bench a bit more interesting. Of you might want one player on the bench, but it just doesn't. Like, because FPL is really where I'm coming from, you know, in terms of the fantasy game that, like, this is somewhat modeled off. And obviously a bench in FPL matters because players sometimes don't play, right? Whereas in VFL, like, players, they play, right? There is no, like, oh, he got a slight knock in the week, so he's not starting this game. Like, there's none of that, right? Like, okay, someone could be ill, but, you know, then we're giving sub points out. So, yeah, the bench, I think, needs a reworking. And you know what's funny is we might go back to what was actually happening in the alpha version of VFL that was made by Fabio, which is, I'm thinking about doing the bench as half points. You get half points for the bench, returning to maybe 8 and 3, and then making it half points, because that then means that if you do pick players like this, you know, like for instance, I had Oliveira on my bench the entire time. Now Oliveira actually did okay, right? Like, he would be getting me somewhat, you know, a decent amount of points. But I also had, you know, Prize here for a very long time as well. He would be getting me a very mixed return of points, right? Like, he'd be getting me all over the points in terms of half points, you know, which would be crazy. So yeah, I do think that that is a solution, because then you actually have to think about, who do I want to bench and who do I want to play, and do I want to just fill my bench with 2 cheap players, right, and maximize who's in my starting lineup, or do I want a bench that is at least okay, right? So instead of picking 2 5s or 5.5s, you might be like, well, I could go up to a 6 or a 6.5, you know, for this team that, you know, I think could be okay. Right, like if we do let's take a look at like some of the 6.5 players. Did anyone score decently well? Right, like maybe a DFM player. Right, like, oh, maybe I have a bit more faith in DFM, you know, or like a Batty G here pops off and, you know, gets 30 points. You know, or is your bench going to have like 7 cost players, you know, who might do something, right? Who might be okay, who might be able to, you know, squeeze just a couple more points out overall. Than, you know, your 5 cost players. But again, like if you picked Angel, you know, he ended up with 33 points. It's not disaster, right? Particularly this last week if you played him, and I know some of you did, because you had to. So yeah, I think that that would make it more interesting and actually give you a decision without being too complex, right? I think that's the thing. A lot of people, you know, will suggest things to me and say, you know, you should try this or you should try that. And a problem I have with a lot of those suggestions is I don't want to make this game complex, right? I want to make it pretty simple, that as soon as you pick up like the basics of the scoring, you know, the +1 for the 4K, +3 for an ace, okay, I can understand that. You understand the maps, okay, you get points for winning a map by more rounds. Like, once you get your head around the scoring, I want it to be very basic of like, yeah, I understand this, right? I want players who get a lot of kills and win maps. You know, they're going to do well. And I kind of want to keep it that way. I don't want to change up too much, but I do think the bench is one thing to fix for next year. In terms of like what will come after champs, I'm not sure I'll be able to do it for Ascension or even Game Changers Championship, because I just don't know enough, to be honest. I mean, well, I might try it, right? But I'm not convinced by that, and also I don't know how exactly those tournaments will run. And then we definitely will be back, you know, for 2025. Kickoff also provides some unique challenges when it comes to VFL, but we might just run a game for Kickoff and just, you know, see how it works, see if it works. And if it doesn't work that well, then it is what it is. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the game. I am thinking of different ways, you know, like obviously in FPL as well, they have chips, right? So like triple captain chip, I think could be an interesting one of like, when do you play your triple captain? That's something I might think about as well. See if we can code that in the game. But obviously this whole year basically has been a bit of a beta test in terms of, you know, does the game work? Is it fun? Do the rules make sense? Right? Stuff like that. And I think overall we've succeeded in that sense. And so hopefully for next year we'll have, you know, being able to create your own league with your friends. You know, not next year I don't think, but maybe in the future, right? A draft mode where you can only have, you know, 1 player from a team and all that kind of thing. I think that, you know, things like that hopefully will come in the future, but obviously might take a bit of time. But I hope you all enjoyed the game, and yeah, those were just some rambling thoughts.